We'll start today's show with a quote from the great Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, who once famously said, "It is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 175. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for following along with all we've got going on in the Bengals world. And the big thing in the Bengals world this week, the NFL Scouting Combine. So here's what's coming up on the show today. Yesterday, Duke Tobin spoke. It's one of those days of the year where the Bengals director of player personnel speaks to the media. He did so in a couple of different forms. One at the podium to the grander scheme of media. Just about everybody who wanted to listen could listen. And then another more private one with the local beat writers. I don't have the audio from the local beat writers yet. That's something that's going to come later this week. And I have some things you'll hear today that I think Duke does a better job of explaining later in that conversation that we'll get to. But we're going to do multiple episodes this week, at least two. We're going to do an episode this week on what Duke Tobin said. We're going to do an episode tomorrow on what Zach Taylor said, and we might do a finishing episode at the end of the week. Not sure yet exactly, but there will be at least two episodes of the Ball Don't Lie podcast this week. So thank you for being here. Coming up on the show today, as I mentioned, what Duke Tobin had to say, my favorite thing going on in sports right now, and two more prospects this week to take a look at. I did Reuben Bain Jr. and Caleb Downs last week. We did Caleb Banks after the Senior Bowl. I've got another defensive prospect that I think you should keep an eye on if you're a Bengals fan that we'll get to later in the show. But let's start with what Duke Tobin had to say. And the quote from Abraham Lincoln at the beginning, you'll understand why I feel like that might be applicable to this situation coming up in just a little bit. But let's start with the very beginning. What Duke Tobin said to start off his media availability. And for a little bit of context, this is a really good thing. Jay Morrison is back on the Bengals beat. You may know Jay, of course, is covering the Bengals for a long, long time for a variety of different athletes. He unfortunately lost his wife a couple of months ago, and he has been away from the beat for obvious reasons. And he returned to cover the Bengals at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. And Duke Tobin said, "You know what, Jay, it's so great to see you. Why don't you start us off?" And Jay, of course, being a professional, asked a Trey Hendrickson question. Here was Duke's response.
All right, let's have somebody else get us started. Hobson, you got something? I don't throw anything on or off the table with Trey. We're excited about attacking this offseason. We have resources to attack the offseason in a big way, and we want to do that. In terms of how we're going to do that, how we're going to allocate our resources, who is it going to be on, our own free agents, what's our intentions there. I'm not going to get into that right here. It's just not the time to announce that to the rest of the league. So that's the best way I can answer that.
Favorite part of that is that Duke Tobin has acknowledged the Bengals have the resources, which they do. They have cap space and they have cash. And he also said, attack. We are going to attack this offseason. That's exactly what you want to hear if you're a Bengals fan and you know how important this offseason is to the franchise. Now, when they met previously, when Duke had that big, long, hour-long press conference towards the end of the season last year, or a couple of months ago, I guess it was in January, a month ago, he didn't reveal much about how far along they were in their process, what exactly might change, and all that sort of stuff. Well, they're further along now in their process. Here's what Duke Tobin had to say about just how far along are the Bengals in this process.
Unfortunately, we're really far along. When your season goes kaput and you're out of it, you're into this area a lot quicker. And we have stability on our coaching staff, and so we are far along. We feel very confident in what we want to do, who we'd like to do it with, and we'll see if those things can come together. But we feel like we're really prepared for this event and for free agency.
Okay, so two answers that really set the tone as far as I'm concerned as to what the plan is going to be for the Bengals in free agency. Feeling very confident, feeling very prepared, feeling like they have a plan. They know what we want to do and who we want to do it with. That tells me that the Bengals have kind of gathered all this information. They know who they want to take in the draft. And obviously, it's still very early, but they have their board of guys that they like the most. They know who they want to target in free agency, and they know and understand that they have the resources to attack free agency and this offseason altogether. These are the things that you want to hear when it comes to the Bengals in their offseason. Now, are we going to hear everything that they're going to do? No, of course not. And we're not going to get an answer on Trey Hendrickson until next week. By the way, March 3rd is the deadline that the Bengals have. If they want to tag Trey Hendrickson and try to trade him, it has to be done by March 3rd. If it's not done by March 3rd, Trey becomes a free agent and the Bengals wash their hands of him. I'm still leaning in the direction that that's what happens with Trey Hendrickson, but the report from last week was that the Bengals are going to spend some time in Indianapolis this week talking to teams at the combine to figure out, okay, what exactly is the value for Trey Hendrickson, and is this something you would be interested in so we can tag him and trade him? I don't think that's going to happen, but I do at least think it's a possibility, and we will have an answer to that by March 3rd, which is going to be next week, about what the Bengals want to do with Trey Hendrickson. So far, 2 for 2 as far as answers. Not going to share too much, but we're ready to attack, and we have resources, and we have a plan, and we're far along, and we've got continuity on the coaching staff, and they're very confident for this event, the NFL Scouting Combine, and for free agency. Those are the things that, as a Bengals fan, I want to hear from Duke Tobin. But there are other things that have to get done beyond just free agency and the Scouting Combine. There are things like extensions to players like Dax Hill and DJ Turner and Chase Brown. Here is what the Bengals Director of Player Personnel, Duke Tobin, had to say about extending some of those young players.
Yeah, in terms of extensions and how that affects the rest of it, sometimes you can do extensions within the cap count that you currently have, and sometimes you can't. We juggle all those things. That we have a number of resources, and we're going to use them the best way that we can to improve as many areas of our roster as we can. We have things that we definitely want to get done, and we've put a lot of time into it. We've had a lot of people involved in trying to sketch out the best plan. Now, the best plan never goes as orchestrated, but we have a good plan in place, and we're looking to improve our team in every way we can. And if that's with extensions, so be it.
Looking to improve our team in every way we can, including with contract extensions. Are you noticing what's happening here? Duke Tobin is putting it all out there. Yes, we have a plan. We have money. We want to attack. We know what we got to do. We are going to fix this team this offseason. Now, later on in the day, Duke said he feels like they have a Super Bowl caliber team. I don't know why he would say that, and we'll talk about that later this week. But right now, you're setting yourself up and putting yourself in a position to where you have to back this up. At least in my mind, you have to back this up, because right now it's all talk. And once, the bullets start flying in March, it's going to be whether or not you're walking the walk. But I've heard everything I've wanted to hear so far. Have a plan, have resources, want to attack, and are open to extensions, and we know what we want to do. Okay, fantastic. Now, one of the things that a lot of Bengals fans want them to do is re-sign Dalton Risner. Duke Tobin also provided an update for the latest with with the Bengals and with Dalton Risner.
He came in late to the process, really fit in. I thought it ended up being a great fit for him in how we play, and he became a great fit for us and came in and filled the need for us. Did a nice job, fit in well. I've got a ton of respect for him. Really enjoyed getting to know him. He's really, a fantastic person just to be around in the locker room on a day-to-day basis. And he's a guy that we've talked to, and we'll see if we can get something done. He's got decisions to make, and we've got decisions to make, and he's a guy that we like a lot.
Duke Tobin on the latest with Dalton Risner. Doesn't really sound like to me that those two sides are close to coming up with a deal. The unfortunate reality is that the Bengals just don't value the guard position. They never really have. However, I think you can look at the answer that Duke just gave and said, wow, this guy came in late. We were a fit for him. He was a fit for us. He played really well. He worked out well in our locker room. You're naming all the reasons why you want that guy on your team and why you should value that guard position. Now, the Bengals obviously don't. They've let guys like Kevin Zeitler walk in the past, who has continued to have a very good NFL career. And by the way, is a free agent again this year. It's one of the most maddening things about this organization is that they don't value those interior offensive line positions, especially guards. Now, Ted Karras, they obviously haven't, and they've done a better job of investing in that. Cordell Volson, they spent a draft pick on. Alex Kappa, they spent money on. Dalton Reisner, they spent money on. Lucas Patrick, they spent money on. So they are kind of shifting in that direction of maybe valuing a little bit more. But how much do you value it right now? Because that clearly was a fit. He was really liked inside the locker room. Guys really, really wanted to play around him and be around him. And Duke himself even talked about the impact Dalton Reisner had. Are you willing to go a little bit above what you might normally pay for a guard because of those other intangibles? And oh, by the way, he's been a really good football player for you and fits exactly what you want to do with your system. These are the things that the Bengals have to get better at. And we don't know how this is going to play out. And maybe Dalton Reisner's like, I want to be here, but I want to test the market and see if I can get a little bit more out of you guys based off what some of the other teams say. That very well could be the case here. And it very well could be that the Bengals have made him a fair offer, but he just wants to see what other teams are going to do. That might be true. That's fine. And they're able to do that right now. So hopefully Dalton Reisner is a Bengal and you don't have to spend another draft pick on a potential guard, or you don't have to overpay or go for somebody else who might be less of a fit in free agency. But that's where the Bengals stand with Dalton Reisner. Speaking of free agency, talked about how it's kind of been brought up a couple of times, with Duke in this conversation. And you're at the Combine, which is more of a draft-centric event. The fact that he's talking about free agency tells me it's very top of mind. And, you may remember a couple of months ago, I did an episode about how similar I feel like this offseason is to the 21 and 22 off seasons of the Bengals in which they built those Super Bowl teams. Well, Duke was asked about that by Charlie Goldsmith, and here's what he had to say about comparing this offseason to the 21 and 22 off seasons.
Kind of forward looking, so I'm trying to think of exactly what all happened in those years. But yeah, we're going to attack it, and try to build our roster from all sources. And the draft is one of those sources, free agency is another. Perhaps re-signing some of our impending free agents is another. Extensions so they don't get to free agency is another way to do it. But we're going to look at all areas, and we're going to try to attack this offseason and fit our needs with the right people. And that's what our focus is, and we're excited about it because we have resources to go out and do some things.
There's those two words again, attack and resources. He said attack twice just in that answer. He said resources again at the end. He continues to set himself up to do what Bengals fans have been asking him and the organization to do, which is to have an offseason that mirrors that of 21 and 22, where you are aggressive in free agency, you do fill your needs, and you do create a position for you to be best player available, to be flexible when it comes to the NFL draft at the end of April, and you can have a little bit more plug and play type of stuff. Now, Duke did talk about that philosophy in the local scrum with the media. We'll talk about that later this week as well. And I thought there were some really good answers from Duke when it comes to that. So stay tuned to this channel, and we'll talk about what Duke had to say when it comes to some of the more draft strategy type of things in the NFL draft. And then there was the quote that I think is maybe a little bit misunderstood, but I think one that made me scratch my head and made me think, does he actually know what he's talking about? And listen, I like Duke Tobin. I've been open in saying that. I know I'm probably among the few that do, but he said something that left me scratching my head. What are you talking about, Duke Tobin? Here is his answer about the Bengals and whether or not they're all in.
So the question's on whether we're all in or not. I've been doing this a long time. I've never not been all in. We are all in. We are trying to get the best team possible with the resources we have. Last year we went all in. We signed over $400 million worth of contracts going all in. That's what we do. We want to be all in. We're trying to put the best roster together every year, and this year is no different.
I don't know that I could agree that they've always been all in. And if they have been, then I don't know that they know what the definition of all in really means. Now, what's frustrating about that answer is that, you hear all the stuff we've talked about so far, attacking and resources and plans and people and all the stuff that you want. That makes you feel like an organization that is on the verge of being all in and is going to go all in to try to fix this team this offseason. And then you hear them say, well, we've always been all in. Well, you weren't all in last year. You weren't all in the year before. There is clearly a difference in the definition between all in that a lot of Bengals fans might share and all in that Duke Tobin and the organization itself might share. He also talked more about that later on in the day that we'll get to later this week. But that's what made me think of the Abraham Lincoln quote. I don't think Duke Tobin is a fool. I think he's a very smart guy. I think he is a very regimented guy. I think he could do a better job of expanding his horizons and opening up his circle of trust when it comes to player evaluation. I think there are things that he could absolutely do better, but that is incredibly concerning to think that his standards would suggest that they've always been all in when that's just not true. And that makes me worry about what his standards really are. And if you've been a Bengals fan for a long time, you understand this worry and you've seen it. And this is not new information whatsoever. But hearing him say that in comparison and contrasting with what he had said throughout most of the press conference today makes me wonder, okay, you're saying all the right things, but will you actually do all the right things? And does your definition of a plan and of attacking and of resources that might fit what fans would describe as being all in, do those two things match? And I have my doubts about whether or not they do. I hope that they do because, as we've talked about, this is a team that I think can quickly get from where they are to where they want to go, which is back to the Super Bowl. I don't think that's crazy to think that that's possible sooner rather than later. You just got to be able to do it this offseason if you're Duke Tobin. Beautiful morning for a cup of coffee. I don't know about you. All right, let's finish it up with a prospect to watch here coming up this offseason. Now, we've talked Ruben Bain, we've talked Caleb Downs, we even talked a little bit about Caleb Banks as a guy to keep an eye out on after the Senior Bowl week. Well, I'm going to give you another one, and if you're a Bengals fan, you might roll your eyes. You might say, no, dear God, no, please no, like Michael Scott from The Office. But just bear with me here because I think this is a Bengals style of player, a Bengals style of pick. He is an edge rusher from Clemson, kind of similar to Miles Murphy, by the name of TJ Parker. Here's the deal on TJ Parker. He's 6'3", 265 pounds. Really good power rusher. He needs to improve his secondary moves. But in 3 seasons at Clemson, had 21 and a half sacks. This past year, he had just 5. The year before that, he had 11. In those 3 seasons, he also had 41 and a half tackles for loss. Dane Brugler from The Athletic has him as his 7th ranked edge rusher in this class. Daniel Jeremiah, in his top 50 of all players in the draft, has TJ Parker ranked 32nd, and he has moved up 6 spots since DJ's last update. So he was 38th. Now he's up to 32nd. That's a guy who is trending in the right direction as we get to the combine and as we get towards pro days and then eventually to the draft. This is a guy who I think could move up some of the draft boards. It just feels like a Bengals type of pick. Here's what Daniel Jeremiah wrote about TJ Parker. He's an intriguing edge rusher with the versatility to slide inside. The Bengals want that. They want interior pass rush. He had a monster 2024 campaign with 11 sacks, but his production dropped this past season with just 5. He's a rugged pass rusher with a powerful shake and bull move coming off the edge. He can jolt blockers with his hands before separating and closing the distance with the quarterback. He doesn't have an elite burst when rushing outside, but his quickness plays better when he rushes inside. Again, That's key when it comes to the Bengals. Against the run, he can generate knockback power at the point of attack, and he's adept at keeping opponents' hands off his frame. That's important. Overall, Parker wasn't quite as impactful in 2025, which ultimately could lead to a real value selection for his drafting team, but he did help himself with a strong week at the Senior Bowl. Interesting. I'm excited about that. That's a guy that I think could be a Bengals type of pick. Now, am I picking him over Caleb Downs? No. Am I picking him over Reuben Bain? No. I don't know if I'm picking him over Caleb Banks or Peter Woods at this point, but that's a Bengals type of player that you need to keep an eye on. Coming up later this week, actually tomorrow, I'll talk more about what the Bengals had to say at the combine, including what the head coach of the Bengals had to say, what Zach Taylor said when he met with the media and everything else going on at the combine. By the way, the schedule for the combine today is Wednesday, February 25th. The place kickers, defensive linemen, and linebackers, they are all having their orthopedic exams, media interviews. The kickers are going to work out today. The NFLPA meeting is happening and team interviews. Meanwhile, defensive backs and tight ends, they're getting their general medical exams, their pre-ordered studies, their team interviews, that sort of stuff. Running backs, quarterbacks, and wide receivers are doing their NFLPA meeting, their pre-exam, and their team interviews, and the offensive linemen are arriving today. On-field workouts begin tomorrow for the place kickers or for the defensive linemen and linebackers. That'll be the most notable one when it comes to the Bengals. I finish with this. My favorite thing happening in sports right now, it's NASCAR, and it's 2311 Racing, the racing team owned by Michael Jordan. They're 2 for 2 to start the NASCAR season. This coming off of the offseason in which 2311 Racing took NASCAR to court about revenue sharing issues and won. It's very rare that a team takes NASCAR to court and wins. Michael Jordan did, and so far, his team has won twice to start the NASCAR season. Both races by Tyler Reddick, who won the Daytona 500, and then again at Echo Park Speedway, which I think is a dumb name for the Atlanta Motor Speedway. Either way, it's my favorite thing happening right now in sports. Michael Jordan and the joy of winning that comes with his team in NASCAR. I think it's really fun to watch. All right, that does it for this episode. I'm going to be back tomorrow with another one. I hope you'll stay tuned right here on this feed, wherever you're listening, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get this show. I appreciate you listening. Please like, subscribe, follow, share it with a friend. Check me out on social media as well at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow. In the meantime, have fun. Be safe. Go Bucks.